We're kind of strategically chameleon-like when we show up at places because, like Ruthie said, a bluegrass festival is very different than, say, Freedom Palooza in terms of like maybe the expectation of what people are going to see on stage, and yet we find ways to thread the needle. Like, for example, at Freedom Palooza, we might open with unpopular ideas, whereas at some of these other events, like that songwriting camp you mentioned, like we did that on the last night after we had won people's trust a little bit. We're like, I kind of like these guys, and like
Yeah.
now we can sort of like maybe go a little deeper into certain ideas.
Yeah.
I think the art of the set list and presentation is a big part of some. It's a big thing I think about in terms of who am I playing for and like what journey are we going to take them on today. It's there's some calculation to it, but I kind of enjoy the Freedom Palooza thing these days because I don't have to maybe be as strategic about it. I can kind of let it all hang out and just sing whatever comes to me in the moment.
I'm Sienna Mae Heath, and this is Real Unity. Today I'm joined by musicians Ruth Ungar and Mike Merenda of the Mammals, coined by the Boston Globe as a party band with a conscience. Together we dive into the poetic rebel heart embedded in their albums Nonet and Touch Grass, elevating the return of the protest song and rallying cries for environmental justice, labor rights, pro-peace, and community healing.
Well, Mike and Ruthie, it's an absolute pleasure and gift to have you on the mic today. Humbled to have two performers with me on the mic today. And Michael, when we met at PorcFest, I was absolutely moved, distinctly, truly moved by some of the lyrics and the overall energy of your songs, some of which I'd love to explore today, such as Beyond Civilization and Radio Signal. Been listening to those on repeat, actually, kind of become anthems over here in my corner of the world. So thanks again for making space for a conversation today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Likewise. And Ruthie, I learned that you're the daughter of Jay Ungar, who's one of my favorite fiddlers. So as we speak today, I'd love to welcome the theme of family as it relates to your background, and your present day family, as I understand, is quite musical as well. And that overall theme also comes into some of the lyrics of your songs, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, reflecting on some of your recent performances, such as at Freedom Palooza, which was in the same region of New Hampshire as PorcFest, as the Porcupine Freedom Festival, how do those venues compare to some of the other venues that you've played at?
I guess in some ways it's a brand new audience compared to the circuit we've been on for the last 25 years. I mean, not 100%, but 2020 sort of changed everything, especially for musicians. And we found ourselves, maybe for the first time, kind of disenfranchised from our own audience, and have spent the last bunch of years both trying to bring our old audience with us on the journey that we're on, but also seeking a new audience who might be more on the same page as us of where we've ended up. So I find those freedom events to be really validating because you get a lot back from the audience, such as yourself. Our message seems to really resonate with the freedom voluntarist crowd, and that's a new space for me to be exploring. So it's really nice to see who's out there and how the music resonates.
Yeah, and I think Mike has written a lot of songs in the past 5 years that some of the actual songs he's really more comfortable singing at something like Freedom Palooza than maybe at the other songs that our band tends to play. But even the songs that could be sung anywhere, they sound different wherever you play them. So sometimes a line or a verse in one of his or one of my songs that, it just plays differently in a different room, and that's always going to be true. I mean, certain songs we wrote years ago, we still sing, and they mean a new thing to us. Like we're our own new audience sometimes.
That's true. Right.
Yeah, but we've been reflecting a little bit because we did just do an epic run from all the way out to Michigan to a beautiful festival called Bliss Fest, which indeed, everyone's running around going happy bliss, you know, and I love that. And I love the, you know, I'm sure kind of mixed political crowd in a way, but certainly more of like a typical folk festival energy that I would have grown up with. And then, you know, that same week going to a songwriting camp, and in the Catskills, there's very intimate, and, you know, hearing deep personal stories from individuals, and then and being much more like small and connected. And then immediately going to Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival, which is, you know, who knows? It's not a super political environment. So it's more like people literally just picking tunes in the campgrounds. And you know, that whole genre of music is different. And then, yeah, a week later, there we are in a beautiful backyard at Freedom Palooza in northern New Hampshire, live free or die. And it's really an honor to be welcomed in all these different environments, and really special to me that all these different people are taking the time out of their life to throw a festival, to hold the space for music at all and community, and to keep traditions going and let them evolve and let us be a part of it. So I'm not sure if that totally answers the original question, but we've been thinking a lot about that.
We're kind of strategically chameleon-like when we show up at places, because like Ruthie said, a bluegrass festival is very different than, say, Freedom Palooza in terms of like maybe the expectation of what people are going to see on stage. And yet we find ways to thread the needle. Like, for example, at Freedom Palooza, we might open with unpopular ideas, whereas at some of these other events, like that songwriting camp you mentioned, like we did that on the last night after we had won people's trust a little bit. We're like, I kind of like these guys. And like, now we can sort of like maybe go a little deeper into certain ideas. So I think the art of the set list and presentation is a big part of something. It's a big thing I think about in terms of who am I playing for, and like what journey are we going to take them on today? There's some calculation to it. But I kind of enjoy the Freedom Palooza thing these days because I don't have to maybe be as strategic about it. I can kind of let it all hang out and just sing whatever comes to me in the moment.
Can we talk for 2 seconds about your song Unpopular Ideas you just brought up?
Sure.
Because it made me think there have been many audiences, festivals, concerts where you get like real cheers for certain verses or lines, or just for the song itself. And the biggest was out in Sisters, Oregon.
That was huge.
It was huge. And, you know, we weren't necessarily even expecting that, but we had like a palpable response. And part of it for me is the actual unpopular ideas in the song Unpopular Ideas. And part of it, I think, is just the idea that you can have unpopular ideas at all.
No matter what. It doesn't even matter what they are.
It's like a 2-layer song. It's like, right. Even if you're not into every idea in the song, you support the freedom to have ideas that might not be popular, or, you know, and that in and of itself is such a nice thing to be able to sing about. I enjoy, you know, even if I'm just standing there playing the fiddle, I enjoy supporting that song and watching people hear it for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I made notes of a few lyrics that resonated with me. But just to start on the idea of having unpopular ideas, I hadn't actually considered when people hear that first line, I'm afraid I have some unpopular ideas. I imagine a lot of people can relate because being a minority voice is rather subjective, and I think a lot of people can relate to being a black sheep of sorts. So, like, you know, probably people will chuckle just at that first line. It's rather welcoming and unifying in itself.
Yeah, I think so. And he opens, you know, the next line being, our health is derived from letting go of fears. And, you know, it's pretty hard to want to disagree with that. So I think it eases you in, you know. It's maybe by verse 4 where he's yelling, big pharma runs the whole thing, and a for-profit industry don't want you to be well. And maybe people have just started dancing at that point and they're not even paying attention, or maybe they hear it and they're cheering, or maybe they don't know what the heck he's talking about, or maybe they do, but it's a mix. Unless you're at Freedom Palooza, in which case they definitely got the line.
Well, yes. I'm surprised that that line could actually be so unifying. I wrote it down actually in relation to your terrain theory podcast that our health is derived by letting go of fear, and that government officials are mostly bought. The former, though, about your health, I don't know that a lot of people necessarily agree with that, especially post-pandemic. I think a lot people that were like, essentially on the left and still on the left who were against big pharma and perhaps even a little anti-vax. Now, like the idea that you could just, just let go of fear and put freedom over fear and not catch COVID. I don't know that that's necessarily a popular perspective. What do you think?
You're right if you're talking like literally, but I think people think it's a song and like letting go of fear sounds great. They don't think, but I like to hold on to fear. Like no one would, counter that with the opposite. So I think even if they're not like ready to let go of medicine, it just sounds positive.
I think what I've discovered, you mentioned the Terrain Theory podcast. So I started that with my best friend, Ben Hardy. We grew up together in New Hampshire, actually. I think 2022 we began. It could have been 2021, but pretty early in the lockdown years. We were listening to people like Zach Bush and Tom Cowan, and they keep mentioning this phrase terrain theory, and then you look it up online and you get debunked pseudoscience, yada yada, in this on page 1, and then you on page 2, 3, 4 of Google, you can start to piece together that there's really something there, that this is a debate that's gone back to Pasteur and Beauchamp. And Ben, it's really his baby. He said, we've got to put all of this under one roof. So he started terraintheory.net as a resource library. And then the podcast is a weekly thing we do together. But that's all by way of saying what I've realized these last 5 years is that the most controversial topic, I think, is health. More controversial than we've been anti-war activists, we've been anti-fracking activists, we've thrown our hat in the ring of different causes over the years, but health is the one that really gets people's hackles up. So to say our health is derived by letting go of fear, you do get a mixed response, especially in a post-COVID world, because people were really compliant to the message that you should be afraid. You should be afraid of this thing you can't see. You're going to kill grandma, so be afraid and comply. So it is a bit of a loaded statement to start a song with in this day and age. I think in 2015, if I was singing that, it would just go by and it would just be like self-evident.
And don't you think there are people out there who would say, like, if you have a cold or if you have this or that, even if they're doing traditional pharmaceutical type remedies or taking Dayquil or whatever to go to work, wouldn't you think that they also know they should get rest and get fresh air and,
right,
that maybe some exercise and being out in the sun? I think it's just generally accepted that those things are good, or like water and sleep and things that are maybe like free, and but the idea is that that's all you need, I think, is what's controversial. I mean, I don't think it's controversial to say like get some fresh air and take a nap, but it's controversial to think that that's like that
the other shit might be doing more harm than good. Right. Yeah.
So I think there can be common ground on like the things that just feel healthy to us as beings. And then this really rough part is to say that's maybe hopefully enough. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
The thing that I think dovetails with your work, Sienna, is so in 2020, I mean, that album Nonet, that Radio Signal and Beyond Civilization, some other songs, If You Could Hear Me Now, that kind of speak to the times, that was slated to come out in May of 2020. And we were going to do this big tour of Australia, and I had a big summer festival season and the whole thing. And of course, that all got canceled. And I joke that in the year 2020, the Mammals played more shows than any other band in the world. And I think that was like 8 shows, but that's still eight more than most people played. Free concerts in the park where everyone's sitting in a silly chalk circle and that whole thing.
And the album did come out. It wasn't canceled.
It came out.
We released it in May of 2020.
It didn't get the push, the tour that you would normally get.
The U.S. mail still shipped them.
Yeah, and we did a lot of radio interviews and a lot of, online StreamYard type of concerts, which I never want to do another one of those again. But what I'm getting to is, from May through, say, September, I did everything I could to promote that album. Ruthie and I both did. We did 1 billion live streams. We did the Facebook show. We did all the stuff. But by October, I was kind of running out of gas on that. And I was starting to get a little depressed with like the change of season and where's our career and what does this all mean? What is going on? And I'm meanwhile like mainlining all this, alternative information in regards to health. And as I've said 1 billion times, I've had to redo my entire education the last bunch of years. But Ruthie, in her wisdom, signed me up for a permaculture course, a permaculture design certification class, which began, I guess, January, maybe February of 2021. And it was on Zoom. It was like 5 or 6 hours a day, Saturday and Sunday for maybe 6 weeks straight.
Yeah.
And so by the time the spring rolled around of 2021, of April, I was raring to go to like get my hands dirty in the dirt. Now, mind you, I traveled the world talking about and singing about localism, but never really practiced it because I was always in a van or in a venue. And so it was the first time I ever dug a hole and put a seed in it and watched it grow. And it was really life-changing because I got a new appreciation for the outdoors, for the pastoral, for the seasons, for gardening, all the things that go along with that. Before you know it, we've got mushroom logs and chickens and bees. And it was really a rebirth for me in terms of how to spend a day and what to spend your energy doing. Because before that, it was just driving and writing songs and playing and making albums. And that felt fulfilling enough. But I joke that I went from playing the guitar to playing the yard, whereas what can I do with this space? And so I kind of became a homesteader, which really connected me to place in a whole new way.
Yeah, no, I was thinking and to the sun and the air and all those
exactly.
life-giving elements.
Right. And that dovetails so beautifully with my new perspective on health and equilibrium and homeostasis and all that. Yeah.
And something that came to mind as you were speaking about that evolution in your world, in your microcosm of getting your hands in the soil and actually practicing what you sing or what you preach, it reminded me of a quote that gardening is the slowest of performing arts. Would you say that resonates too?
I've never heard that.
That's great.
I did see in the trailer for some of your work I was checking out yesterday. I love that quote. I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. I think about that all the time. But the one you just said, say it again.
That gardening is the slowest of performing arts.
Oh, that's really beautiful. It's like each season is a song, and the set list is, 30 years long. That's how it feels right now.
Yeah. It's definitely like an improv piece, a bit. A collaborative improv with Mother Nature.
A sing along with
a dance.
A sing along with the soil. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have another album brewing. Well, your new album, volumes 1 and 2 of Touch Grass, as I understand, is coming out in November, and I thank you for the sneak peek of it. Now, of course, touch grass is as a popular slang phrase among the kids these days. Rather common, but of course, in your experience of being a musician and being very particular about the lyrics that you choose, and likewise the titles of your album, what prompted that to be the next title?
It's such a great phrase, touch grass. In our world, there's also this grass and that grass. There's a festival called Fresh Grass, there's New Grass, there's Bluegrass, there's alt grass. I don't know what I'm missing, some of the obvious ones here, but touch grass almost sounded like a new kind of music that maybe we play, but also, yeah, as a command, it's usually lighthearted and warranted.
It's very, touch grass. Very, very funny. I mean, the first time I heard that, like you said, it's a slang amongst the kids, and we have a 17-year-old, and so we're kind of privy to some of that stuff. But the first time I heard that, my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe that was a real thing that the kids were saying to each other.
It's funny
because it's it is my credo in a sense, is get your shoes off and go outside and connect with the earth and get that negative ion exchange. So even though it's a little dorky to maybe as an adult grab it and make it your album title, it was just too irresistible. And it felt very of the time, of the moment, is very current. And
as our Gen X, cohort knows, like, we rolled around in the grass a lot, and then it became bad to do that because you're afraid of ticks or whatnot, especially around where we live. So I definitely have friends who do not touch the grass,
right?
Literally, and I'm not one of them. So I don't know. It's just
it does take a certain amount of effort to commit to getting your feet on the actual earth.
Yeah.
It's one thing to go for a walk with your sneakers, but that is still not the same as touching grass, as it were.
So if it reminds one person, we're stoked.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, my understanding and my experience of Touch Grass, the album, that is that it is soul nourishing. It certainly evokes themes of nature, and likewise that there's some real like activist anthems weaved in there. But it's very actually organic to pile on the theme of gardening. I don't really feel like it's preachy. Actually, something you said earlier reminded me of a conversation I had with a fairly prominent comedian in this space about like, well, when you said that when people are dancing to your songs, they're not necessarily analyzing every lyric like this Mercury and Virgo gal over here. They're just enjoying it.
Right.
Also, I love that you get that reference. But yeah, they're just like, they're really in the energy rather than in what might just be like a motivational speech where you're hanging on every word. But likewise in comedy, which is an adjacent form of art, laughter is so transcendent, it actually relaxes the body. And likewise, dancing, it relaxes the body. It allows for some sort of release and unification, too. You might dance with someone that you'd otherwise argue with outside of that show.
For sure. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Think, Dance, Feel, I think, was a slogan we had adopted a couple albums back that tried to summarize what it was like to experience one of our shows. It's a little bit of everything, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of feeling, a little bit of dancing, all things in equal measure. But yeah, the new record, we don't like to do too many on the nose protest songs. We used to do that back in our wily 20s, when the Iraq war was going on, and I felt very justified in getting on a soapbox and speaking out against, the red team at that point, the Bush administration and all that. But it was very divisive. And like I said, I had friends who I lost in that war. And I felt very justified in trying to push back against the mainstream sort of monolithic propaganda. But it was divisive at the end of the day. We had people who'd come right up to the front of the stage and flip us the bird or threaten to slash our tires, or festival organizers who begged us not to sing certain songs again, or they're going to lose their corporate funding. And again, that kind of felt good. It's like, well, there's a righteousness, like, oh, we're making waves and someone's noticing, and we're disrupting, we're a cog in the machine. But as we got a little bit older, our philosophy became to sing more about what we're for as opposed to what we're against. And that seems to bring, again, more people with us as opposed to just this like sort of pissing contest as to who's right and who's wrong. And man, like in 2025 compared to 2005, like we thought we were polarized and divided then, but like it's reached a fever pitch at this point. So while we do have
culture,
in terms of the culture,
we meaning
I guess Americans, certainly. So Ruthie and I we're trying to walk in our truth thoroughly without compromising our ideas or ideals. But like I said, take people with us as opposed to polarize audiences, which is a trick. And we push the boundaries, and I don't know if we always succeed with every show, but that's always the ideal, is how many people can we take along with us and maybe open their eyes to some new ideas. Like Ruthie mentioned the Sisters Folk Festival out in Oregon. We were there in September, and I started it's like, how can you bring some of these traditionally left-leaning, NPR listening, folk music loving sort of baby boomer generation? How do you bring some of these people up to date with some of the things I'm thinking about? And I started bringing up this great anarchist folk singer named Utah Phillips, who is someone that I know they would have heard of before. And Utah used to speak very eloquently about ideas of anarchy and voluntarism. He was the first person I heard use those terms. And when I was younger, I couldn't quite contextualize it. I didn't really know where he was coming from. As an adult now, it's really a touchstone for me. But I started talking about Utah Phillips in an intro to our song, What It All Is. And I explained voluntarism. I said, it's the principle that all exchanges between men and women should be without coercion or violence. And people applaud. In fact, a bunch of people got up and gave us a standing ovation just for the introduction.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, when you frame these ideas in a certain way, it felt very unanimous that everyone was on board with those ideals. But it's another step to point out that the government is the biggest perpetrator against the ideals of coercion and violence, and that men and women should not engage in such activity. But, baby steps, one thing at a time. I'm able to plant these seeds with large groups of people and then sing the song. And I think it hits them in a different way because of that.
Yeah. And I think you wrote What It All Is, knowing some of these ideas, but not maybe also knowing them the way you do now. And that's an example of one of those songs that
definitely
lasted and will keep lasting, hopefully, for us in our set list, and it has sort of like a minor key and a bit of aggressive energy, D minor. Like I play a lot of kind of wild fiddle stuff, particularly in a live show. It's like it has more of like a cathartic energy. It's not really a dancey number, but it's kind of like
it's not a mellow number though. It's a rocker.
Not mellow. And so there's a lot of time between the verses, and the verses kind of sound pretty and lifted, and they're kind of about like life and death and nature and a little bit, a little politics in there, but it's poetic. So it's not a divisive song. And then, with that intro, it really took on a new life,
a whole new energy. The opening line is, I go down to Washington town. I watch them monuments grow, not in size, but in legend. I guess we can still pretend none of us really know what we know. There's a lot packed into that line.
It's a really good opener of a song. Oh my gosh. And then, that could resonate for someone who's like, tear down all the statues of old white men.
Sure.
And that could also resonate for anybody who's not sure what they know about the government right now.
Or history.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be a lot of things.
Who built the Capitol building? Like, is it really what we were told? Right. All this.
Were you thinking that when you wrote the song?
Absolutely not. I didn't know a thing about the Tartarian thing or anything like that. No. So it is nice when a song can age and kind of transmute its ideas.
And we've been around for long enough to know that, like, if you write a very specific I know X, Y, and Z song, probably in 10 years X, Y, or Z will have changed and you're not going to be able to sing the song. So write it in a way that really you can stand behind. Like my song Do Good, which is just about doing less so that you can, be in the moment and appreciate what you have. And I really hope, we can't outlive the truth of that message, because that seems pretty straightforward and small. But I need to listen to that advice. That was advice to myself, who does too many things in a given day.
It's true.
But, we have gotten big cheers for that one too. People yelling like, preach.
Absolutely. It's the quietest, most beautiful protest song I think I can imagine. The new record, by the way, Touch Grass, is available. It doesn't come out on streaming services till November 1st. This is kind of our I don't know.
Strategy.
It's our strategy for the release, which is that it's available for sale at shows, at concerts, and through our website. So if someone wants to pay for the album, they're welcome to buy it. And if you want it for free, like music has unfortunately become in 2025, you got to wait a little while. So it's available behind a paywall.
until November 1st, in which that's when it becomes free on all platforms.
Yeah.
And now there's a couple free songs out there, but
yeah, it's a very strange thing, Sienna, that you can spend 4 years of your life and $10, $20, $30,000 creating
at least
an album,
way more,
and then it's just free. That's something when we started in this business, that was not the case. And so it's not that we're slow to adjust to it. It's just that it feels unjust to us still.
Well, and what's freaking awesome is we have all these people who are our fans and want to support us and who are buying physical or digital copies right now every day.
Yeah, it's great.
During this period where we're pretending it's 2008 still, and then it's going to be 2025, and all the people who don't know us yet get to stumble upon us on Spotify like everybody else.
Yeah, and hopefully a bunch of new people like your audience.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm eternally grateful that you would have us on your show, because it's very hard to promote music and it's very hard to reach new people. And like I said, our evolution has been quite a journey, especially like straddling pre-2020 and post. And so any opportunity to talk to someone like yourself and your audience is not lost on me. It's a very big deal. And it's been honestly very hard to book interviews, even in the music space, even though we've been in this space for, like I said, 25 years. It's so oversaturated that I'm not getting a huge response, even from some people who've been very supportive of us in the past.
Well, many of the traditional people we went to are no longer in the scene because
they've also lost their jobs. Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people have lost the outlet they used to write for, or the, even things that weren't brick and mortar seem to have dissolved.
Like the weekly arts mag, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing that kept tabs on the culture, and someone who could review an album every week and preview your show when you came to town. Like that, those things seem to be disappearing.
Yeah.
So it's a podcast world, right?
Yay. Glad that podcasts are still happening.
Well, it's a clever strategy. And a couple of the songs you mentioned also really touched my heart. Do Good is, I actually hadn't considered it as a protest song. In a way, it's a pro-peace song rather than an anti-war song. And it brings to mind something that's been said when one is invited to an anti-war rally. One might reply, whenever there's a pro-peace rally, I'll attend that instead. And Do Good is simple, but it's very pure. And perhaps, yes, protesting a world where our attention spans are very short and we're not necessarily present to the possibility of acts of kindness. And also there was a line in there, Ruthie, if I recall, about not only being present to acts of kindness, but moments where you can hear wisdom. What came to mind for me was like making space to hear wisdom from your elders, and to weave those stories into something meaningful. Actually, something I'm working on my mom's side of the family. But Do Good was really sweet. I listened to it on repeat as well, and what it all is, it does bring to mind the remembrance of a friend buried near Arlington, and there's a line that goes, "How long do we go on living like this?" And interestingly, it brings to attention food systems, the war on our food systems, saying, "But I've been told, some seeds you sow, some come back and do you harm." So this tracks connecting war and our food systems, and how are those linked in your view? And where did that line about the seeds that may do you harm come from?
Right.
This is Mike's song, but can I say the line that precedes that line? I don't own no munitions plant. I don't own no factory farm, is a line I wrote in an old song that we slightly updated, which was Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger's updating of an older song. And then it morphed
called
into
the Wartime Blues, right?
The Wartime Blues. What you gonna do when they send your man to war? What you gonna do when they send your man to war? Drink muddy water and sleep in a hollow log.
And then the line that you wrote,
I don't own no factory and no munitions plant. I don't own no factory and no munitions plant, so I won't get rich by killing in some foreign land.
Right. So my song is riffing on her song, which is riffing on Woody and Pete, links in the chain, as they
And
would
maybe
say.
it was actually Blind Lemon Jefferson, as I'm singing it,
Yeah.
that wrote the original song.
Yeah.
Before it was Wartime Blues, it was some other blues.
Yeah.
So all credit to him.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm riffing on that. I don't own no
Factory.
I don't own no
Munitions
plant.
But you said,
I don't own no musician's plant. I don't own no factory farm.
yeah,
But I've been
flipped it
told
around.
them seeds you sow
Some
someday
come back.
may come back and do you harm. Okay, we finally untangled it. There it is.
Yeah, those are the follow the money lines. That's
Again, when I wrote that, I don't think I was thinking like a permaculturist or thinking in terms of healthy soil. Like, so literally, I think it was more metaphorical, but now very much so. I mean, you know, we have to order wheat from Italy that's labeled glyphosate free if we want to consume bread, because I've been suffering from what we thought was a gluten allergy. I think it's just glyphosate poisoning for 15 years. So I've been acutely aware of what goes in my body, especially of late. The best food being the stuff that you can grow right in your own backyard, or at least source locally. But food really has become weaponized, I would say. And we could do a whole conversation about just what that means. But just like it seems like a Herculean effort to get people to take their shoes off and touch grass, like to try and like my mom and dad, for example, like they grew up in a time where like there wasn't organic or non-organic food. There was just food. And so to try and re-educate them that they should choose organic when they can, and that, seed oils seem to be a bad thing, and just what is glyphosate and why is it used, all this re-education that you need to do. It's really hard for them to understand what's happened to the food, because food in an Italian family, especially, food is love in most families, but especially in my family. And to raise questions about the quality of what they're putting on the table, it's a very touchy subject, because it's provided and presented from the deepest part of their nurturing instincts, right? And it's right for them to be confused as to why someone would be questioning the nourishing qualities of that food.
Yeah.
Now, you could make the argument that the fact that it was prepared with love trumps all of and anything else. But like I said, I've been in this rabbit hole long enough to know that the food's been very compromised, especially from the factory farms, especially in the industrial agriculture space. And so you really need to fine tooth comb your ingredients. And I didn't even wear glasses a few years ago. It's like, I can't go grocery shopping without my glasses anymore. But as Tom Cowan says, if it has ingredients, you probably shouldn't be eating it.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, that narrows it down.
Like, you remember when you first read Ishmael?
Yes.
By Daniel Quinn, and there was the whole takers, leavers dichotomy in that book and some of his other books, and the idea of the food being locked up.
Daniel Quinn's Ishmael was a real touchstone for me. In fact, it was kind of the precursor to terrain theory, in that in the spring of 2020, when no one had anything going on and we were all on our phones too much and stuck online, Ben Hardy, who I mentioned earlier, who I co-host Terrain Theory with, the podcast with, I was going on and on about Daniel Quinn's Ishmael, and I was sending it to people by the dozen. I was ordering them on thriftbooks.com for a couple bucks a pop, and I've probably sent out several hundred copies of that book. I'm not on board with every single idea he presents in it, especially as time has gone on, but the nuts and bolts of it are very sound. And he delineates, first of all, he makes the distinction that, how does he put it? That there's great diversity in humanity, and that our culture, as it's practiced today, is not synonymous with all of humanity.
Because there's more than one way to live.
And we've kind of homogenized, you might even call it the Western style of living, or the American way, or whatever it is. But he he paints with broad strokes and basically indigenous populations being the lever cultures, and the homogenized modern culture being the taker culture, where we don't leave it better than we found it, we just take. And that emerged when we locked up the food, which is what Ruthie was referencing. Is when we decided to lock up the food. And he points to the fact that no other living creature, apart from some squirrels like burrowing some acorns away, like no one locks up the food. The food is just available. It's there. I would argue that we live in a false construct of scarcity. But that doesn't apply to any other living creature, like
except house cats and dogs.
Well,
because we decided that's the way. We actually spent a week or two in Greece and discovered that cats live everywhere, like deer or birds there. So
yeah,
it was striking. Sorry.
Yeah, and so it's not like I'm a hunter gatherer in practice. Like I garden and I try and source food locally, but it's a really interesting thing to ponder. Yeah. What it means to lock up the food and what it does to a culture.
Yeah, and in many areas, foraging is actually illegal.
Right.
Which is
or to collect rainwater.
Yeah, things like that. Right. So that was, I think, another beginning of a shift of understanding about food. And you mentioned the song of Mike's Beyond Civilization, I think. Isn't that a direct Quinn?
Yes, that's the name of a Daniel Quinn book. Another one of his books is Beyond Civilization.
So that was...
When Nonet came out, I was really deep into Quinn.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of the songs were really inspired by his work.
Beyond Civilization was one of the songs he sang at Pork Fest, and we were on the same wavelength because I just brought up the lyrics. I sensed that we were going there. Yeah. Beyond the phrase beyond civilization, I think, might mean something different to me than it does to you. But of course, for the sake of our conversation, I want to bring up some of the lyrics that moved me. Essentially, we're trying to get back to that destination beyond civilization, and you're expressing this imagery of, in a dream, flying above a penitentiary, the feeling of liberation, being liberated from prison before awakening to the so-called real world. You woke up from the dream, essentially. And there's this lovely symbolism of the birds. As you say, you saw the birds taken off in formation. They were beyond civilization. And birds are often known as symbols for the departed. Actually, when my dad passed nearly a year ago, it was incredible. There was a bird that came outside of his window, and then a whole chorus of them came and sang to him as his spirit was liberated. It was yeah, it gave me the shivers. And but birds as symbols of the departed is not unique. There's a lot of people, even without spiritual roots, in the sense, I think everyone's a spiritual being, but people who don't consider themselves spiritual per se will still pick up on this symbolism after someone's passed. Perhaps a cardinal will land on a tree outside, and they'll think, I think that might be my aunt. I think that might be my mom. And why do you think the birds came to mind as you were imagining this other realm, this in between place in a dream that was, as you said, beyond civilization?
I think that line was actually very literal, because the first verse is, I had a dream. I was flying above a penitentiary. Me and my friends rising up above it, and we were free. I woke up, I was mistaken. I was choking on my frustration, trying to get back to that destination beyond civilization. But the next verse, I'm awake. I'm out of the dream. It's, I woke up, I ate my breakfast, couldn't think of what to do next. Sat there in contemplation, trying to wrap my brain around all this desecration, I think.
Probably.
I looked out on the lawn. When my hope was gone, just when my hope was gone, I looked out on the lawn, saw the birds taken off in formation. They were beyond civilization. So that wasn't.
Did you literally see birds?
Yes, that was a literal observation of me feeling a little bit at wit's end at my kitchen table, and then feeling the sense of freedom imparted by these creatures in my yard that were not tethered to, the stress of the day. They were just being birds.
And I think that Daniel Quinn, when he's like illustrating in this argument between two characters, we can't just return to just foraging and being 100% in our natural state. And, if civilization is bad, you can't roll the tape backwards. So the idea of beyond civilization as opposed to like rewinding, it's like it's a progression forward and we don't know what it looks like yet. And so the painting the picture of a new manifestation to be is beyond civilization. So the birds, they might be impacted by civilization somewhat, but for us to get that untethered or I don't think we have to know where we're going exactly, but we're trying to paint the picture.
When pressed, he's passed away, Daniel Quinn, I think 2019, 2018, not too long ago, right before the whole, thing that happened. He would have had thoughts about it, I think. I don't know. But when pressed, what is it going to look like beyond civilization? And he would always say it will probably look exactly like it looks now, with the exception being we're not poisoning everything. I don't think, like Ruth said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I have some unpopular ideas about the, free energy technology and 0 point energy and ether energy and all this. Like, I think our energy sector is probably the biggest polluting sector. And I think it's a false dichotomy to pit that against what we call green energy, because I think the technology does exist to have clean, free energy. But that's kind of beside the point. Having said that, I do think we can live in a way that doesn't kill everything, whether that's industrial farming, whether that's energy, whether that's, even like the materials to build a house, like spray foam insulation is not good for you. You shouldn't be breathing it all day, or the formaldehyde, or like the AC current that runs through the walls. Like, there's ways to achieve the things that we want and the ways that we want to live without them imparting harm to living creatures. And I think that's what Daniel Quinn's getting at. At least that's what I take from it.
And also the idea that if there is more than one way to live, that it's more small scale, unique niches of the world. As we tour, it did become more and more, wow, every town looks exactly the same over, even our first decade of being on tour in the early 2000s. And I think that people really long for local uniqueness. And I think that, I do. And I think that people are proud of that and getting back to that in their communities. And, maybe even other local like structures that are more individual and unique and resilient than big domineering ones.
It seems like diversity is the most resilient strategy. I mean, that's what nature proves over and over again. And so the more uniform we become as a society, the more susceptible we are to all manner of incongruities or just illness at large, whether that's like physical or mental.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is unity and diversity, and moving towards a divine civilization. There is such nourishing wisdom in nature, in the plant world. In fact, diversity is a strength in the world of plants. And when we consider the garden as a blueprint for how we can co-create a more beautiful world, just to plug for my presentation at PortQuest, which is I know, Mike, when we had a brief conversation, I could tell we were like, okay, we need to continue this thread. It was there was a serious resonance there. But just to digress and look closer at the lyrics of Beyond Civilization, the imagery of the flying and the dreams, the birds, and the liberation, as you say, is just so profound. And you say here, as you're imagining your soul freed from the material realm, essentially dying or passing, or what we might consider in the realm of gardening is composting, pruning, letting go. It's all there. It's all there in the garden, and you sing as your grandkids are dancing on your grave. Perhaps you sing, laughing and singing with joy and elation. I believe that they made it beyond civilization. I got chills, but I don't think I fully understand what you meant by that.
Yeah, again, I think it was literal. It's I dreamed that I was gone, but I wasn't really gone. I was just down there in the soil with all my grandkids trampling on. They were laughing and singing. There was joy and elation. And I believe that they made it beyond civilization. It's literal, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That day when I'm no longer here on the material realm, my ashes will still be blowing around somewhere. And my strong hope and suspicion is that future generations will have made it beyond what I would consider sort of a dark time in history, and that they'll be trample on me. I'll be underfoot. I'll be here in some whether in a different realm, but also physically there underfoot when a brighter day presents itself.
I was thinking a moment ago about how you said diversity is helpful in the plant world. I killed a fig tree by not knowing how to take care of it, and then was given another one and tried so hard, and then it looked like it died. It had no leaves, but it was still sort of a springy stalk, not totally obviously dead. So when we went on tour this summer, and I left it in this odd place outside by the front door, just in case it might like that. And we came home and it's like, woo, I've got leaves and we're all good. I'm not moving it. I'm not touching it. I'm not watering it. I'm not I ignored it for a month and it was happy. So I'm going to keep just doing that. But next to it is this weed that's sort of entwined with the leaves of the fig. And it's just some ugly weed. And my instinct was at first to pull it. And then I was like, no, that's your friend. Like, you guys have a thing going on. And so there they are right by our front door together. Still, every time I walk in or out of the house, I'm like, you're both doing good, taking care of each other. I don't claim to understand it, but yeah.
Isn't that the lyric from another song? Let the flowers and the weeds in.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we'll one day get a fig, but in the meantime, I'm just happy that they're happy.
One of my favorite permaculture principles is when in doubt, do nothing. And I think you can kind of live your life that way too. If you're having doubts, just press pause.
Do less than you've ever done before.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think permaculture is kind of self-care embodied in the garden, where you create this environment where the plants can take care of themselves and they can take care of each other as companions. That's what's called families, and there's a spectrum of plants from antagonistic to companion plants. It sounds like your fig tree found its companion, and when you were speaking, for some reason the pair of companions that came to mind were poison ivy and jewelweed. Jewelweed is,
we've got both of those right here.
Well, that's good. I mean, the former is not good, but the latter's, it's pretty cool that God provides us the remedy for the poison ivy side by side.
It's incredible. Yeah, I literally just saw that the jewelweed is blooming right under the trampoline in our yard. Yes, absolutely. I love that. I love that happens. And you're making me want to go identify that weed that's with the fig and not just dismiss it as some, total mystery. I want to find out if we know anything about it.
There's a book by a Turkish writer, Elif Shafak, named The Island of Missing Trees. It's fiction, and it's written in two voices, the voice of a daughter and the voice of a fig tree. Every time I think of fig trees, I think of that book, and it completely caught me off guard. I received this book as a gift, cracked it open, and the first time I read this voice of the fig tree, I think I glossed over the title of the chapter, which clearly labeled it The Voice of the Fig Tree. And I'm reading it, I'm thinking, where is this wisdom coming from? Like, how could this person have I've experienced the entire love story of the parents of the daughter. And then I think that might have been something that sowed a seed for me, and the idea that not only are plants companions to one another, but then there's the relationship between the gardener and the garden. And I see forms of that in your lyrics too, where there's kind of this budding, this brewing relationship. And of course, in music and in the art of performing on stage, then there's the relationship between you and the crowd. And it's so, like, life is just so rich, especially in the realm of the arts and creating beauty in the world. And when I think of beyond civilization, I think of it in a few different ways, like in a dream, as you painted in the lyrics of your song. That's kind of like an in-between realm, perhaps like that's really when we're most awake, is when we're dreaming. We're in a way just dreaming our way through this life, sleepwalking through this life. And so beyond civilization might be that, like, another realm, another dimension, or it could be what we're creating. Of course, a divine civilization that we're creating and moving forward into. And likewise, in the natural world, there's the old world that's falling, or things that have had their time and they're being pruned or decomposed, and then there's the new world that's forming, the growth. There's just so much there. And another form of beyond civilization that comes to mind is this theory that there's another realm that we came from before we were born. I call it the time before. There's actually a poem on my Substack about that. The time before, where we perhaps chose our soul families or made soul contracts, where we'd come together in pairs or in groups, and not as straightforward, as some of the labels that are attributed to it, but just this idea that we're meant to connect and to trigger certain missions in life, so that we can create that civilization that's beyond where we're at now.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to is what would be called, I think, just an elevation in consciousness, which I think we all feel is happening, like a quickening. I think we've been stuck in kind of a mid-low consciousness, but as we kind of collectively rise, and there's coherent fields that entrain each other. So when one rises, it tends to entrain the next. And I think that's wrapped up in what you're describing is a more enlightened society where the consciousness has just reached a new plateau.
That soul nourishing feel, I think, is also reflected in your song Radio Signal. Likewise, heard that at Pork Fest, in which you saying that I roll down the back roads of my soul, looking for light like a radio signal. It's hard to say that without singing it. And yet again, you evoke the imagery of birds, and you sing, to the bird up there in the air, all my cares are up there with you, and your soul is everywhere. To explain this, I cannot begin to. Just love it.
Thank you. Whenever I'm in the garden and a hummingbird comes to visit, it's the greatest thing in my day. Some of these birds, when they show up and then disappear, hummingbirds are really mysterious that way. They're just there for a second. It's the type of thing like, oh, I want to get a picture of that. And there's like no hope. You're never going to get a picture of a hummingbird. But I think you're right. Birds impart a special magic in our lives. And I do show up, I guess, a lot in my songs. You're pointing that out to me today. But that song was, again, spun out of my love of Daniel Quinn. I was just actually reading, when that song came out, I had written something about it that I had completely forgotten about. But each verse is kind of a tribute to one of my elders. The first verse, there's a wind and it blows on by. That's a tribute to Bob Dylan and Blowing in the Wind. And there's surely answers in it, right? The second verse, to the bird up there in the air, all my cares are up there with you. That's Daniel Quinn again, is that there's this soul energy that is pervasive in all living things. And then the next verse, the third verse, I don't know if I stuck an elder with. But the fourth verse, the mountain stands by the sea, and then here's your teaspoon, let's start digging. That's Pete Seeger and his Teaspoon Brigade. So I don't generally write songs very literally. I tend to kind of like ad hoc them and channel and kind of my intuition is more important than my logical mind when I'm writing a song. But when I read my synopsis of it, I was reminded of how literal those references were.
But that isn't literal. You're not saying, Pete Seeger, you're a great guy.
I guess it's only literal to me.
Yeah,
right?
it's still not literal. It's still very poetic.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
just sort of honoring sources of wisdom in your life and saying your own piece.
Well, and the verse that I did skip just now is there's a town down by the end of the road and some people trapped there in it. I guess they were never told to start a journey, you must first begin it. I think that's probably my favorite verse in that song because I do feel like that's kind of where we are as a culture, is that, like I said, I've had to redo my education in so many ways these last few years. And I think people are kind of resigned to think that we as a culture know all there is to know. They've deferred to the experts and think, well, we know all there is to know. We know how things work, when really nothing can be further from the truth. And, Woody Guthrie wrote This Machine Kills Fascists on his guitar, and Pete Seeger wrote This Machine Surrounds Hate and Forces It to Surrender. And sometimes I think, what do I want to write on my instrument? Sometimes I think I want to write, find out for yourself, and just broadcast that message to people from the stage, because there's so much more to learn about really everything, whether it's health or spirituality or history or cosmology. There's just so much, and it's really fun to know that every day you can light your mind on fire with information. Especially, I mean, it's a double-edged sword with these black rectangles that we all drag around all day. They can definitely be the pitfall of many hours of your life, but they can also open up incredible avenues of knowledge if you know how to curate it correctly. So the people at the end of the road, I guess they were never told. Like, I have a lot of hope for the people who are just kind of going along with the humdrum, because I think information is contagious. If anything's contagious, it's that. And I think that's why Ruthie and I like singing songs, because it's a very delicate way to spread information. It's very disarming, and it can kind of sneak up on people, and it really can reach people in all walks of life, whether you're a music lover or just someone who like is flicking through the radio stations or whatever it is. Like, you can get to people when they're least suspecting it. And I think, I mean, you're a special case, Sienna, because you listen very deeply to stuff. And like, frankly, you're probably like our target audience is someone who like really listens and really takes it in and reflects it back to us, and it means something to you. And like, that's very meaningful to us as songwriters. But it's also wonderful to know that you can potentially reach somebody who doesn't even like music, who doesn't even really think about music. And that's, I think, the power of music in general, is that it transcends a lot of boundaries.
Can I spin off of something you said a second ago? As I actually got emotional and I almost started crying, which, as Mike will tell you, is not that unusual. But like, I was sitting here hearing that verse, a town down by the end of the road, some people trapped there in it. I guess they were never told to start a journey, you must first begin it. I started thinking about our son who's 17. And this is like a time to begin something. And like I see a cat back there. Hi. That cat's there to cheer me on. So there was a moment where I met a musician the other day at a recording session who also has a 17-year-old son. And so I was bonding with her. I'm not sure what kind of, I don't know her very well, but I said, so did you watch your kid go through puberty in a box? And she said, yes. She knew exactly what I meant, just because that age that they were when everyone was locked up at home was that, we heard their little friends' voices change over the computer. while they were gaming in their room. It's crazy. And today he is heading home from a summer road trip he decided to take. He drove from the East Coast here in New York, all the way to Portland, Oregon for the summer to spend time with a friend out there. And that's kind of his version of like touring colleges, because he doesn't want to go to college and he wants to do stuff that is out there with his buddy out there. And he wanted to, we go through Portland time to time for 3 days, but he wanted to really be there for like 3 weeks and just really feel it and see if he really wants to go there when he graduates in a year. And I was just thinking of, the courage it takes a young person, particularly who came through the past 5 years of isolation and intimidation and confusion, to
Judgment,
to really have the courage to go on a journey to do that. It's profound to me to watch that. It made me proud. And I think the song, like our kid grew up with that song and other songs, and I think it sinks in.
Right, exactly.
And like today, I just got him an Airbnb in some small town in Montana for his first day home, on his way home. Because I think when you're 17, you can't get a hotel room by yourself. So I just love that, like, I asked him, does this sound cool? He did one of those on the way out. He met a lady named Julie in Kansas, stayed in her Airbnb, and it was cool. And I'm just proud. Like, I went on the Airbnb thing and there's a review from Julie saying that he was polite and followed all the house rules and he's well recommended for any future stays. And like, it's just cool because you have to get out there. You have to go somewhere and do something and see what's ahead and stay in a house with some people you don't know yet. And that's what knits fabric of community back together. And that's what knits, these special local areas together, is the people who stay and have roots and are welcoming hosts, and the people who travel and are polite and conscientious travelers. And that's the world I want to be in.
Well, and when the lockdown was brought down and we were not able to tour and stay on those couches of those hospitable people, I remember how you were so I don't know quite somewhere between anger and confusion and just like really just disoriented, because you're like, you were specifically thinking about the kids. Like, this is their birthright. Like, this is that's how you grew up. This is how we've been living our lives for weeks, months, years, decades. And like, how can that be taken away? Because it's really just, it's communion with
so
community.
Many people have put us up.
Right.
Thank you out there. So many people have fed us a nice, wonderful meal, and before or after our show.
And now to be taught that
it's
for our
almost
kids,
more important than the show. When it all gets removed, it's like, wow, I miss it equally.
For this idea that now we should fear those people, fear that community, and for our kids to be receiving that message, I think was what you were reacting to. Is that didn't compute, and it still doesn't compute. And I'm glad to know, in hindsight, that I feel very justified in thinking that we were right. Like, that was not right. That didn't feel right. And now I think we all sensed that it wasn't right, but most people complied. They just went along with it. But on the other side of it, I think that we were very justified to seeing just how wrong that was, not just at a surface level, but like at a soul level.
And it will take courage, in the best of times and the worst of times, to just get out of your comfort zone and go do something, to try something, to meet new people. And, to all the young people out there, I'm excited for you.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that experience of parenthood with me. It's really tender, I imagine, especially for the past 5 years. And going through puberty in a box it's a profound metaphor. It's true. Whether the box is quarantine or our digital rectangles here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And our daughter, who is amazing, is 13. And so she had a completely different period of that, different experience, and is unstoppable and amazing. And we'll see the next era.